Can anybody hear me?
Will the Committee of Supply please come to order? This section of the Committee of Supply will now consider the estimates of the Department of Crown Services. Does the Honourable Minister have an opening statement?
I do, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone. This is definitely unprecedented times, and certainly we're very pleased, though, that we're able to continue in our democratic roles and our elected roles to ensure that Manitobans continue to have government and opposition and whoever else that wants to be a part of this great process, along with our staff, be involved in this very important area of government and estimates. So I will open. I'm pleased again today to be here, Mr. Chair, and to present the 2021 estimates for the Department of Crown Services. To start with introductions, in attendance with me today is Mr. Idan Hassan, our Special Assistant. As indicated in this year's Fall Throne Speech, this government is committed to protecting Manitoba's agenda that includes protections for health care and vulnerable Manitobans, jobs and the economy, tax reductions that keep income in Manitoba's hands, education and childcare, and Manitoba's financial, environmental, and energy future. The Crown Corporations will do their part to meet these objectives with a decrease in Manitoba public insurance rates, less expensive and more convenient access to retail liquor sales, and Manitoba Hydro rates rate increases below 3% this year. Our government is committed to accountability and transparency by releasing the soon-to-be-completed report from the Economic Review of Bipole 3 and Kiosk projects will ensure that Hydro remains Manitoba's clean energy advantage. Initiatives taken by Crown Corporations are undertaken under the auspices of the Crown Corporations Governance and Accountability Act, Mr. Chair, which provides a clear governance framework to prevent any backroom political interference with the Crowns. Our government has reintroduced legislation to streamline the Public Utilities Board and reduce costs to ratepayers. Reducing red tape and the administrative burden on Manitobans is a core policy of our government and a priority for Cabinet members. We continue to work with Manitoba's Crown Corporations to streamline and remove unnecessary regulatory requirements. Advancing reconciliation with Indigenous Manitobans is a responsibility for all members of Cabinet. We will better align to the engagement practices of Manitoba's Crown Corporations and work in collaboration with Indigenous and Northern relations on this important initiative. As Minister of Crown Services, I will continue to ensuring that Crown Corporations are accountable to the people of Manitoba and that the high quality of service Manitobans expect is delivered. Although there is much more work to be done, Mr. Chair, and many more achievements to realize, I'm pleased to present and review the Department of Crown Services 2021 estimates of expenditures. With this, I wish to conclude my opening statement, Mr. Chair. I look forward to also working through this process, this very important democratic process, and taking questions for Manitoba Crown Services estimates. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
We thank the Minister for those comments. Does the critic from the official opposition have an opening statement? The member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start by thanking all the Ledge staff who helped to make this meeting happen today, and I'd also like to thank all the civil servants who are out there supporting the Minister today. And someone who worked in government, I recognize how much work goes into this kind of a process, so thanks to everyone for helping to support this meeting happening here today. So we're here today, as the Minister's stated, to discuss our Crown Corporations, but specifically today we're going to be focused largely on Manitoba Hydro, and it's important to have an opportunity to ask questions of this government and of this Minister, because we're at an incredibly important moment in the history of this Crown Corporation. We know that Hydro is soon to release a 20-year strategic plan that will paint a picture of the path forward for the organization. But a pattern of interference from this government raises a lot of important questions about their motives and their end goal. And so from direct interference from hydro subsidiaries to the elimination of the role of the pub as we know it, we have a lot of questions to ask. Hydro is incredibly important to our current economy, and we need to do everything possible to protect this resource for generations to come. So I hope that the Minister is mindful of this as we ask questions, and that he does his best to answer our questions in an open and transparent manner in the interests of all Manitobans. Thank you.
We thank the member. Under Manitoba practice, debate on the Minister's salary is the last item considered for a department in the Committee of Supply. Accordingly, we shall now defer consideration of line item 5.1a contained in Resolution 5.1. At this time, we ask that the Minister introduce their staff in attendance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and certainly I'll echo my critics, the member from St. James' comments on, again,
Minister,
thanking,
my apologies. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I did not recognize you, and for Hansard's sake, I'm obliged to do that. So I now do that. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and certainly, again, I would like to thank all civil servants and all staff that have helped put this together in a very, very quick time. It's wonderful work that they've done to prepare us for this virtual meeting of estimates, first of its time, my understanding. And at that, I would like to welcome our Acting Deputy Minister of Crown Service as well, Bernadette Prune, and also our Executive Director, Rob Morrissey, and also Assistant Deputy Minister of Central Finance, Ryan Klaus, joining us here today. And again, thank them and their teams for all the work they did to pull this off. Thank you.
Does the committee wish to proceed through the estimates of this department chronologically or have a global discussion? It is agreed then that the questioning for this department will proceed in a global manner, with all resolutions to be passed once questioning has concluded. The floor is now open for questions. The member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start by having the Minister explain how profits from Manitoba Hydro are directed to general government revenue.
Honourable Minister. Minister, if you could unmute your mic, please. We can't hear you.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, in light of this, again, being the first time to experience Zoom and not being able to be in person, I'll if the committee is willing, I'll use a hand signal when I'm ready to answer. Is that something that we can do?
That seems reasonable. We'll proceed that way.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, just quickly, just to confirm, we have the question correct. The member from St. James was looking for what happens with profit from Crown corporations. Is that correct?
Member for St. James.
I'm specifically requesting that you clarify how profits from Manitoba Hydro are directed to the general government revenues.
Honourable Minister.
Mr. Chair?
Honourable Minister.
Yeah, thank you. And again, sorry for the delay. We're working virtually, and we're all this is all new, so we're just getting through it. So, with that being said, the understanding with respect to Manitoba Hydro, our profits are directed through the general rate application. So certainly the PUB has oversight, and it's through the GRA. So I hope that answers the question from the member from St. James.
The member for St. James.
Thank you. Just want to point out that it took approximately 5 minutes for the minister responsible for hydro to tell us how profits are transferred from Manitoba Hydro to government general revenue. It's quite concerning. Could the minister explain how much money was cut from employees' wages due to involuntary days off with hydro?
Mr. Chair?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And it's not surprising that the members already going into the sewer with questions, Mr. Chair. And certainly this process is important. And whether it takes 5 minutes or 5 hours, I think getting the facts on the table and on the record are much more important than the fiction that the member from St. James seems to surround himself in. But of course, being a staffer with the former Selinger government, I can understand why he's gone down that hole. So essentially, for the sake of the rest of the committee, certainly we know that COVID has presented a number of very challenging issues, not only across government, but in the private sector. We know very much that a number of Manitobans are feeling the effects of COVID. And certainly we've worked with Manitobans and in an all hands on deck approach, Mr. Chair, and Manitobans have really picked it up, and they understand that in order to get through this pandemic, we need to ensure that we get through it and we're stronger when we get through it, so we can recover as Manitobans do and have and proven to be able to, Mr. Chair. So with Manitoba Hydro in particular, the unions, in collaboration with their employer, Manitoba Hydro, essentially agreed that all hands on deck was the way to go and looked at a three days of unpaid time, Mr. Chair, in order to ensure that we can redirect funding, redirect monies, very important monies, to the front lines of our health care, Mr. Chair, to ensure that proper PPE and protection was provided. Manitobans, in particular hydro staff, understood that. They took up the challenge, with the exception of, I believe, 13 members of Unifor that chose not to. We certainly really thank and appreciate the all hands on deck approach that the other unions did in respect to Manitoba Hydro.
The member for St. James.
So I take it from the minister's response that those monies were collected and that he is in a position to identify the totals of monies that were collected as a result of those forced involuntary days off that were forced upon hydro workers. So what I'd like to know next is how much of those funds that government has saved through putting that on the backs of Manitoba Hydro workers was redirected to help government fight the COVID-19 pandemic?
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, again, and I'm certainly happy to correct the member on actually money being collected. This is money that, and the member knows he comes from. He allegedly comes from a small business background. I know his career at the banking issue would give him the opportunity to know how. How a P&L works, the bottom lines of businesses work, and the stressors on one of the most expensive parts of running a business, of course, is ensuring that our staff are well paid, well looked after. And, the bottom line is, though, that nothing was collected. These are savings that are redirected. So when the unions at Manitoba Hydro said, yeah, it's all hands on deck, we certainly want to take our part and do our part for Manitobans. That money is money that wouldn't have been expensed, and hence giving government at large, a whole of government approach, the ability to ensure that there was no shortfall when it came to the important things that are important to Manitobans and safety, like PPE and other very important frontline areas that need to be covered off in our healthcare.
The member for St. James.
I thank the Minister for the response. In the Minister's first response to my initial question, which is how profits from hydro are directed to general government revenue, he stated that they're directed through general rate applications. In his second response, where he talked about the need for Manitoba Hydro workers to have an all-hands-on-deck approach, and by that I assume that they would be expected to incur losses from their expected revenues for that year. He suggested that those funds were somehow to be redirected to support the fight against COVID-19 in Manitoba. Can he help to explain the tension between his two answers, which don't in any way align?
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Oh, thank you. And certainly, my job is to ensure that, the member is getting an answer that Manitobans deserve. And that's exactly what Manitobans have asked of this government. And that's what they've asked of myself in particular when they reelected me for a second time in 2019. And I will continue to do that. And I will continue to ensure that Manitobans' best interests are always front and center. Profits from Manitoba Hydro, as I alluded to, are not directed to government revenue. Profits are a part of Manitoba Hydro's PUB, general rate application, so they're GRA. And again, that has a direct reflect on what rates will be on a go forward. So if hydro is profitable, that ensures that Manitobans can enjoy some of the lowest rates, hydro rates in the country. And we know, Mr. Chair, that is going to be a real challenge for our crown jewel, Manitoba Hydro, on a go forward for generations to come. In light of the decisions made under the former NDP government, and of course we don't have to go far, but just go right into BIPO 3, Mr. Chair. And, the member from St. James knows we've had discussions about alternative energy sources and other things when we had estimates last year. And certainly we appreciate input from the members opposite to ensure that we can better support Manitobans and their needs. But, Mr. Chair, the bottom line is if Manitoba Hydro can control their expenses, they can divert that to the bottom line, and that's rates. And rates so that there's no rate shock. Well, we know under the NDP, there's going to be a challenge over the next several generations. Essentially, there are no profits paid to government, Mr. Chair, and certainly the member from St. James was looking at that question, and I've got a clear answer for him. There are no profits that are paid to government. Again, this is about ensuring that Manitobans can enjoy some of the most reasonable hydroelectric rates in the country of Canada, Mr. Chair. And that's exactly what Manitoba Hydro will continue to do.
The member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let's recap the minister's logic that he just put forward there. Manitoba Hydro employees, according to this minister, need to see wage reductions so that hydro rates can remain low. So this government forced unpaid days off on thousands of Manitoba Hydro employees, arguably, according to the minister, from what he just presented, to keep rates low. So there's a bit of an issue there, given that his government is forcing a 2.9% rate hike on Manitobans at the same time that they are forcing Manitoba Hydro employees to take wage reductions, which, according to him, are serving the purpose of keeping our rates low. Which one is it? What are we doing here? What's the goal? Clearly, the minister is a little confused about how things operate at Hydro, given that he seems to think that we should be both jacking up rates on Manitobans without any accountability to an independent rate review process, and apparently also cutting hydro worker wages for the purpose of apparently trying to keep rates low. So there's a confusing logic there, which I'm hoping the minister can help to bring clarity to. So I asked the minister, how does he resolve those tensions, where at one time he's suggesting that we need to have hydro workers bear the brunt of these wage cuts to keep our rates low, but at the same time he's proceeding, along with his government, in forcing a 2.9% rate hike on Manitobans. How does he explain those two goals together?
Mr. Chair?
Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Chair. And certainly, the member talks about Manitoba Hydro staff taking the brunt of an all-hands-on-deck approach for all Manitobans, and I disagree. All hands on deck is everybody doing their part of whatever they can do to ensure that we can come out of this stronger than we were going in. And quite frankly, that's exactly what not only Manitoba Hydro staff and leadership are working towards. They're working towards ensuring that we can come out of this, and we know that rates are going to be at a level where Manitobans don't have to worry about it and don't have to look over their shoulder or their next paycheck to ensure that they can make that hydro bill. And again, I go back to the 17 years of mismanagement by the former government, Mr. Chair. I mean, the member will sit here and again try to discredit Manitoba Hydro Board, Manitoba Hydro Executive, and he's done it in the House, and he continues to do it every day when their number one priority is to ensure that rates remain low. And that's exactly what they need to do in light of the fact, Mr. Chair, that the NDP government, the former NDP government, reaped billions of dollars of debts on Manitoba Hydro and generations. So really, for the member to sit here today and question our ability as a Crown corporation or as a Crown corporation to manage their financial there's the problem. Let me digress a bit, because I hope I've got enough time, Mr. Chair. But the bottom line is the political interference over the years under the NDP is a direct result of why we're looking at billions of dollars of debt coming online over the next year with Bipole 3 and Kiosk, Mr. Chair. So bottom line is this, Manitobans hired us again to ensure that we fix the finances, repair the services, and rebuild the economy. We are doing that in collaboration with our Crown corporations, and we will continue to protect Manitobans.
Just in response to the reference regarding time each question, And also each answer has 5 minutes allocated. So if you're wondering how much time you have, that is the correct amount of time. The member for St. James.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. So it's clear, let's just put on the record, the minister was completely incapable of explaining the relationship between the cuts to Manitoba Hydro employee wages and how they're using those to fight the COVID-19 pandemic in Manitoba. In fact, he completely contradicted himself with his answer, and I think that was clear to anyone out there who's watching. Hydro profited $100 million in 2019-20, and they're forecasted to profit $51 million in 2020-21. And we've just established that the directed ordered cuts from earlier this year had no relationship of any kind on the government's ability to combat COVID-19. Yet you're still trying to further impact the workforce at Hydro by ordering wage freezes for the next 2 years during a financially difficult time for Manitobans, and when the very bill that attempted to do this was deemed unconstitutional. Does the minister agree that this is negotiating in bad faith?
Hello.
Honourable Minister, we lost you for a second there.
Yeah.
Your video seems to be back in. There we go.
Yeah. I'm
Honourable
back
Minister,
in.
you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And again, ensuring that we have enough resources for our front lines has been and always will be and continue to be through this pandemic priority one for the safety of all our frontline workers. And certainly that is a function that is extremely important, and we hear it, and I know the member from St. James hears it every day when he's in his constituency. And he mentioned about the 2.9% rate increase. I can tell him that, through the PUB review, of course, there'll be an opportunity to save Manitobans even more money through this process. And that's important because we know that in comparison to other jurisdictions in Canada, the PUB process is much more streamlined. It certainly gives more opportunity for the public to engage in a more red tape reduction way. And certainly that is the goal of that review, to ensure that. And during that review, because of the shenanigans of the members in the spring, Manitoba Hydro was not in a position to go through a GRA in the PUB. And so that, again, with their delays and blockades put up in the House, that caused a real challenge for Manitoba Hydro. And Manitoba Hydro was looking at potentially a general rate application of 3.5%. Well, we understand during the interim period where the PUB will be working through their review and ensuring that Manitobans save money, the rate of 2.9% was put forward for Manitobans to ensure that they're kept low. And even though the stress on Manitoba Hydro's bottom line will continue to grow based on decisions made by the former NDP government. As the member does know too as well, the debt to equity ratio for Manitoba Hydro, if you were in a private sector scenario, and certainly the member knows how to look at that through that lens, through Manitoba Hydro and through that private sector lens, he knows that the debt to equity in excess of 88% is extremely high. As a matter of fact, I don't think if it wasn't, for potentially the government being there to support now the decisions that the former government made, that even getting a simple operating line of credit would be impossible for a private sector business in that type of scenario. And that's truly not the way to run a business, and it's certainly not a way to run a Crown corporation. So again, these changes are getting put into place to help Manitobans save money, to ensure that in the long run, Manitobans will have stable, secure, low hydro rates on a go-forward for generations to come. And that is our goal, Mr. Deputy Chair, and I know that that's Manitoba Hydro's goal as they go through, and they continue to go through, re-looking at the new business model for Manitoba Hydro. Coming out of COVID, of course, it has really given them an opportunity, along with many other businesses, to really take advantage of some of the online connectivity opportunities when you're running meetings, people being able to work from home, saving companies and corporations thousands and not millions of dollars in fees and other things. Really, COVID is teaching us a lot, but again, we need to continue to evolve, and businesses evolve. Businesses have to evolve. Well, they've never had to evolve more than they have during COVID. And, examples of that are the struggles that our businesses are going through. And that's why our Premier introduced that GAP program, one of the most generous programs in Canada, Mr. Chair. And again, that's helping businesses with cash flow and with the needs that they need to make payroll and to keep the lights on during these very unprecedented and challenging times. So with that, Mr. Chair, I hope that gives a little bit of more background and a little bit more insight into the global picture here when it comes to Manitoba Hydro and with respect to rates and protecting Manitobans as we go forward.
The member for St. James.
Appreciate that somewhat freewheeling response from the minister. Just one important point to touch on here. The minister referenced the need for a hydro rate increase in lieu of their inability to advance increases that they clearly had planned as part of their Bill 44, which we very proudly stopped from being able to be introduced last March, as the minister stated. One issue with that statement is that at this point in time, Manitobans will never know whether or not that 2.9% rate increase was required. And the reason for that is because the Public Utilities Board and their independent rate review process didn't have an opportunity to determine whether or not that rate increase was required. So Manitobans will actually never know the answer to that. The minister is asking us all just to believe him when he states that that increase was required. But we know that in 2017, his government supported a 7.9% rate increase request that came forward. And it was thanks to the Public Utilities Board and their independent rate review process, which this minister and his government apparently are not huge fans of, that we ended up, instead of getting a 7.9% increase, we only received half of that increase. And that was because the independent experts at the Public Utilities Board determined that there was actually no need for a rate increase of 7.9%, that was far in excess of what was required in order to allow hydro to service its debts. And so, as a result of that decision, all Manitobans had $60 million a year put back into our collective pockets, put back onto our collective kitchen tables in the parlance of this government. And so we sit here and we're being asked and we're being expected to believe the minister and his government when they say that we needed a rate increase. But unfortunately, I just want to be very clear, Manitobans will never know the answer to that because of the actions of this government in jacking it up unilaterally without allowing that to go through an independent rate review process. Back to the question which we were asking, which the minister dodged entirely. The question, again, relates to the logic behind making increasing levels of cuts to the wages of Manitoba Hydro employees. We've already established at the beginning of this estimate session here that there is actually no relationship, none at all, to be said between forcing hydro employees to accept lower revenues this year and allowing the government to fight the pandemic. There's no connection. That's been very clearly established. So again, the minister's government seems to be engaging in negotiation in bad faith. They're backing out on commitments to Manitoban workers. So I'll ask the minister again, could he please explain the rationale for ordering these wage freezes on thousands of working Manitobans?
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And The member from St. James talks about Manitobans never knowing whether the 2.9% increase was required or not. Well, certainly what the member does know and will know very soon, and along with Manitobans, is the effect of making the decision to run Biple 3 down the west side of the province and build Kiosk when we're on the eve of the report on the biggest boondoggle in Manitoba history. So as we continue to be transparent as a government, I know the member would like to hide from the past, but he needs to ensure there be challenges with that side of the House, Mr. Chair, when it comes to transparency. Well, that's exactly why the review was called, to ensure that Manitobans understand, and we will never, ever be put in a position that they were put in the interference of the NDP government when it came to Manitoba Hydro. Manitoba Hydro, again, the member knows that they're sitting right now in a projected debt of over $23 billion, Mr. Chair. It's $23 billion in the last, that's grown, and actually doubled, almost tripled in the last 6 to 7 years under the former NDP government. So, the member has to, first of all, take responsibility for his former government's actions. He was a senior staffer during the Selinger time in government, and he certainly was aware of the decisions being made, being a senior staffer, and was directly involved in those discussions. So he's aware of it. So let's make sure that the Manitobans listening today are aware of that, to be totally clear and transparent of those facts. So, again, it all comes back to ensuring that Manitobans can enjoy some of the lowest hydroelectric rates in the country. And it's Manitoba Hydro will be the first to tell you that's going to be a challenge based on the decisions that were made by his former government. So with that, Mr. Chair, again, he needs to understand, and I think he will after we get through the next hour or so, and hopefully we can continue this discussion tomorrow. But he again, it puts false information on the record. The bottom line is that the Manitobans are going to save hundreds of thousands, not if millions of dollars in fees collectively with an annual review, Mr. Chair, an annual review of rates, a GRA that would happen every year, where you would spend to the tune of millions of dollars in review, where the public didn't have a fair say. Well, this bill will bring in the ability for the public to have a fair say, and it will be the most transparent process ever experienced in Manitoba to ensure that Manitobans are taking an active role in what they own, Mr. Chair, and that's Manitoba Hydro, and they will continue to own Manitoba Hydro. What they do want to own is a Manitoba Hydro that is really focused on their core delivery, and that's delivering hydroelectricity for the most reasonable rates in Canada, and that's exactly what they're focused on doing, Mr. Chair.
The member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So let's recap here what the minister has shared. We're reducing the work week for Manitoba Hydro workers, which results in significant wage cuts. They're now reducing the wages of thousands of hydro workers again after your own government's legislation that attempted to enact that was deemed unconstitutional. And we're being told that all of this is to help respond to COVID-19, yet the minister's own answers throughout the beginning of this estimate session clarified that none of that is true. So we appreciate the clarity on that. We appreciate that getting on the record and the minister laying it all out for folks to hear very clearly. The minister alluded to the incredibly hyper-partisan hydro review, which, according to him, is going to bring Manitobans insight of some kind, but I think that's going to be challenged by the fact that it's being led by not one but two ex-Conservative premiers, which I don't think most people or most Manitobans will receive as being overly useful as a report, knowing that ultimately this information is coming from such a hyper-partisan background. Of course, also concerning is the fact that the current individual who's leading that review is himself a massive champion of coal from Saskatchewan, of course, and he himself has a long record of huge over expenditures on a number of major public projects. So I can confirm for the minister that we on the other side of the House are not exactly anticipating much insight from that review. But yet, of course, we are still interested in knowing when it will be released. So can the minister share any details on when that hydro review is expected to be released to the public?
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, in the attempt to ensure that I'm providing the information to the member from St. James, and of course, most importantly to Manitobans, certainly will provide a little bit more information for Manitobans on exactly what the workforce at Manitoba Hydro and their all-hands-on-deck approach was able to allow the government, all the government, to redirect savings of total workforce of $5.7 million back to the front lines of healthcare. So to ensure that we had that $5.7 million available to purchase additional and a surplus of PPE and other protective equipment for our front lines. So certainly, again, we endeavor to ensure that Manitobans have the facts, and this is clearly a fact that workforce was at the table, and we thank them again, as we do always, for their participation in ensuring that Manitobans are protected as we go through this unprecedented pandemic. In respect to the review and the report coming, certainly will advise the member when I'm aware of when it's coming. It is coming. We know it's coming. They know it's coming, and that's why they're a little nervous about it. That's why they're throwing former premiers under the bus, because certainly that's really the only thing they have in order to try to deflect the harsh realities of decisions that they made that will be uncovered and be public, 100% public, very soon. So with that, I'll certainly give the opportunity for a member from St. James for another question.
The member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate that the minister did provide some clarity there in terms of the total amount of wages that have been taken from Manitoba Hydro employees. According to him, this is going to serve to reduce hydro rates, and this is going to result in somehow helping us to pay for COVID. Meanwhile, his government is also increasing the hydro rates by 2.9%. So again, appreciate the clarity actually on the number and a little bit of actual accurate information from the minister. It's greatly appreciated, and it's good for Manitoba Hydro employees to know to have clarity on how much money was taken from their bank accounts for very questionable reasons. I'd like to shift the conversation to focus now on the Manitoba Network contract, and to ask, the government's known for a while prior to the pandemic that the contract was set to expire in 2020. Hoping the minister can explain what work had been taken to begin a tendering process for a new contract for the Manitoba Network. A timeline would be appreciated, and the dates when RFPs and RFQs had been drafted.
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you for that question. Member from St. James will know, and if he doesn't, I will let him know that, again, as we do talk about whole of government approach, in particular to his question, that would be a central services question. Simply because they are directly involved in procurement, they're directly involved in RFP process and the RFQ process. Manitoba Hydro's involvement is clear. We have underutilized dark fiber that's been underutilized for several years and has been piecemealed and let to a number of NDP supporters over their time in government. And we, of course, recognize and Manitobans understand that that's not the way to do business. That is why we came out early during COVID to ensure that Manitobans know that we're working with their best interests in mind when it comes to connectivity. COVID has also shown us that more and better, faster connectivity throughout rural and northern areas, in particular First Nations, is paramount and needs to happen. And it needs to happen at a very, very expedited speed. And I mean that with no pun intended, because the bottom line is folks now are not getting the connectivity they need to not only run their day-to-day lives, but also to run their home business, to work from home, whether they work for the public or private sector. And COVID has really taught us that. So this government, along with Manitoba Hydro, have said, you're right, they need to get connectivity, and how we're going to do that is work with an RFQ and an RFP through central services, and they're the lead on that. And the member from St. James, if you had another question regarding that, I would certainly expect that you could have the opportunity to speak with that member, that minister as well, and he will endeavor to certainly answer your questions at a different time. But I can tell you, though, that I will continue to, and so will Manitoba Hydro, advocate for our folks in rural and northern regions, including our First Nations, to ensure that they can have expedited connectivity so they can do the things they need to do to grow their economies, whether it be on a First Nation or surrounding areas in the north, Mr. Chair, and that's exactly what we're going to focus on.
The member for St. James. Thank you, Mr. Chair. It appears that the minister is confused about the question here. He's alluded to an entirely different RFQ process relating to our dark fiber, which is certainly an important area that I am looking forward to asking him questions about. But I'm referencing the Manitoba Network contract, which is the data services contract that had been extended in January and that ended up in the hands of Bell MTS, and that extension was worth approximately $40 million. So again, I'll ask the minister if he could explain what work had been taken to begin a tendering process for a new contract for the Manitoba Network.
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you so much. And, you know, it's just such an exciting time when it comes to connectivity. Boy, there's so many good things happening. But I can tell you, though, to the member's question from St. James, the real challenge was this MC Manitoba Network contract that was signed back in the 2000s by then Minister Dave Chomiak. And, you know, the member should be aware, but if he isn't aware, I'll certainly give him a little bit of an education on what happened. Mind you, he was a senior representative in the government, so I'm sure he is aware, but maybe he's just, he's maybe forgotten or it slipped his mind. But, you know, this was a 10-year agreement with MTS signed by Mr. Dave Chomiak at the time. It was untendered. It was a sole source contract by the NDP government. And Mr. Chair, and I have spoke about this before in the House as well, but certainly we'll put it on the record here today for Manitobans. This untendered contract was up for renewal in early on this year before COVID hit, and of course COVID hit, and again we were sit with a situation where essentially everything came to a stop. So at that point, again, nothing was being let as far as any RFPs or anything. We needed to make sure that the connectivity continued, and of course that has continued and will continue. This contract will go back out to the market, but for the interim, there was a clause in this 10-year contract that was untendered by Mr. Dave Chomiak, allowing for an extension. And I can tell you that extension was undertaken because of the fact of COVID. Certainly it would not be wise to be going into the market at that time, and certainly to protect Manitobans and the continued connectivity. And by the way, for the member, because I know his next question where it's going to go, and I'm going to answer it for him right now, this $40 million extension is simply for the outcome of COVID, is simply the fact that there are so much more connectivity required in this existing contract going forward to ensure that Manitobans were protected going forward in this interim period pre an RFP coming back out into market. Manitobans' connectivity is protected. So again, very transparent as I continue to be. It's just unfortunate that we still have a bit of a mess to clean up with respect to this particular entity and Manitoba Hydro issue. So we are, and we're certainly we're heading it. We're going head first into this one, Mr. Chair, and we're making sure that Manitobans still can have connectivity during these very difficult times. And we're looking forward to getting it a tendered contract and an RFP out for Manitobans. And again, we will not make the same mistakes that the NDP did during their tenure.
The member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just clarify for the minister, if he looks over at the government website where contracts and RFPs are listed, he'll find that the contract that was put forward by Minister Chomiak at the time was in fact stated to have been tendered. So not sure where he's getting his information. I'd like to ask the minister, because he keeps referencing that the reason why Manitobans had this contract extension foisted upon them, which was worth $37.5 million, which went to Bell MTS. The reasoning was COVID, that we are here, that they needed to proceed with that contract extension because they didn't have a choice. We're heading into a period of uncertainty. So I'd like to ask the minister if he was aware that direction was sent from central government to Hydro to extend that contract in January, which preceded the arrival of the pandemic in Manitoba by about 3 months.
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, as we want to make sure that we get facts on the record from the government end, and I appreciate the patience of Manitobans that are currently watching live. Mr. Chair, again, as I mentioned, the contract was paused at COVID in March 2020. Again, I had mentioned that in my preamble before for the member for St. James for his information. And, again, clearly you're not going to go in the market during the middle of a global pandemic. And I'm sure the member can appreciate and agree on that statement. The extension is for 30 months, of course. It gives some opportunity for some, for us, as I mentioned earlier, potentially to go back into the market to ensure that Manitobans' interests are well looked after. And the last thing we could do is take the chance that the wider sector, the wider public sector, would be without connectivity during an unprecedented pandemic. And that's exactly why the extension was there. And there was an opportunity to do that within the contract to protect, we thought, to protect Manitobans, in particular the wider public sector when it comes to connectivity, like our schools and our MUSH sector, and just the broader public sector, Mr. Chair. So certainly, obviously, a great opportunity and a great move to ensure that we're protecting Manitobans where they need communication more than ever, Mr. Chair. During this process, we don't know when COVID is going to go away. We know that there's talk of potentially having a vaccine coming in the new year. Well, that's great, but that doesn't help us today, Mr. Chair. And I'm sure the member from St. James will agree on that as well. That look, we need to continue to make sure Manitobans are protected. And one of the areas that that we're talking about here again is ensuring connectivity. And by providing an extension in the existing contract, yes, we absolutely have and continue to go to the market for the best opportunity. We're smart shoppers. Manitobans are the smartest shoppers in the country, and they know that. So again, this is another example of just simply cleaning up a mess left behind, but also finding a balance to ensure that we keep connectivity within the wider public sector, Mr. Chair. And again, heck, if schools don't have connectivity, boy, oh boy, think where we'd be today with a combination of homeschooling going on. Parents have put on their school hats and they're teaching their kids at home every day now, and in some cases, and more and more. Thankfully, though, with the efforts of our frontline teachers and all our educators across the system, they've been very great at providing a good cohort system that they were in collaboration with public health, and it's working. Mr. Chair, it's working to the point where kids can still go into school, be within their cohorts, get an education. Teachers are protected, students are protected. And I tell you, without that connectivity, where would we be today? So this really, and I'm really, really pleased that the member did bring this up, because it really gives us an opportunity to show Manitobans how important it is to ensure that there is no break in that connectivity as we go forward through this pandemic. Look, we could be having this discussion in 24 months from now. Heaven forbid we are still in the middle of a global pandemic. But the reality is we don't know. Maybe the member knows, but we certainly don't know. And, we want to make sure that there's pieces of the puzzle in place that can be moved around at a later date to ensure that the proper oversight is done. It gets into the market, and there's a fair and open, transparent process for Manitobans to see and be involved in.
The member for St. James.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The minister's right. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen, as none of us do, with the COVID pandemic. But what I do know, and what's very clear, is that, yes, thank you. What is very clear is that somehow the minister continues to reference that they extended this untendered contract due to COVID, and yet we have on record that his government gave direction to Hydro to extend the contract, this $37.5 million untendered contract, in January, 3 months before the pandemic hit Manitoba in a substantive manner. So there's a break here in his logic. He failed to answer the question. It's clear that he's not accounting for that little detail in the response he's offered. And, you know, he keeps alluding to the fact that his government is a smart shopper. Meanwhile, they're handing out untendered contracts with no apparent reason. And the reason he's offering, which is COVID, isn't valid, because we know that they told Hydro to extend that contract long before COVID was ever a factor in Manitoba. So again, more questions after this minister offers what he is calling an answer here. Maybe he can explain the rationale for extending that contract without tender for 2.5 years. If they're stating that this was necessary, what's the logic behind a 2.5-year period?
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, you know, we provide answers, we provide clarity, we provide transparency, and the member refuses to acknowledge it. So I guess we'll agree to disagree on that point. But the member is now asking another question, and I've referred to this before. This is Crown Services. This is Manitoba Hydro, Manitoba Public Insurance, and Manitoba Liquor and Lotteries. This is not Central Services. And if the member has a question regarding that contract going further, I think I've provided him ample information from my knowledge, again, as a whole of government approach, but I'm certainly not going to be waging into an area that, quite frankly, I have not been involved in on a go forward. So I hope the member appreciates that. And if he has a question, I certainly would direct him to the member or the Minister of Central Services.
The member for St. James.
Well, I appreciate that the minister isn't accountable specifically for this RFP, and it is the Minister of Central Services that is responsible, but I think he can appreciate that Manitobans expect him, as the minister responsible for Crown Services and ultimately the minister responsible for Hydro, to have some information about what's happening under his watch in that department, or specifically in Hydro. So, you know, maybe we'll go a little further here, and again, just hoping that the minister does have a fairly decent understanding of his file. Can he offer any explanation for the justification of the increase in monetary value of that contract? Could he provide a copy of the contract to help break down where Manitoban taxpayer dollars are going?
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And certainly we try to do this in a fashion that is respectful, and certainly I endeavor to do that, and I would hope the member would also endeavor to do that. And Manitobans don't need to be subjected to the insults that he throws my way. I think it's something that's not right for this venue. I think if the member has a question in particular and he's not getting the answer that he's looking for, then maybe you should ask a different question. But certainly, I think we've been trying to make sure that this is a very upfront, civil, and transparent process, and I will continue to do that. And to the member's question, again, this is a government-held contract. However, it's managed by Central Services. So, again, the member is maybe trying to put me in a position that I can't answer a question, but I've been clear the last three answers that this is a government-held contract and it's managed by Central Services. So if the member wants to continue down this road, he's going to get the same answer. Maybe Manitobans would like him to switch gears.
The member for St. James.
I thank you, Mr. Chair. Earlier on, the minister alluded to the fact that he was aware that this contract had originally been tendered by Mr. Chomiak, and that he later alluded to the fact that it had a provision for being extended. So clearly he has some familiarity with the contract, or he's actually seen the contract. Would the minister be willing to provide us with a copy of that contract for the contract extension?
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Chair. And, it's interesting. The member, I recall, 20 minutes ago mentioning that he was on the government website and noticed that he made a comment about Mr. Chomiak's contract being publicly tendered. Well, certainly we know that discussions about this have been very public, and certainly I provided the information that he's aware of and that I'm aware of. And I've mentioned to him already that it's a government-held contract managed by Central Services. So, again, the member can keep asking the same question. I'm going to continue to give him the same answer. Government-held contract managed by Central Services.
The member for St. James.
So I think Manitobans want to know how we can possibly enter into a contract here for $40 million or almost $40 million, and we have a minister responsible for that department who doesn't seem to have any information available, or at least is unwilling to provide that information to us. I think that's concerning, Mr. Chair, and I'll ask again. I understand that the contract extension would have been managed via Central Services, but I asked the minister, and I asked him in the interest of ensuring Manitobans can see information that will allow them to understand the decision-making behind this government's decision to, again, support a $40 million contract extension untendered. Will he provide any information, or will he provide a copy of that contract extension? Or if there's a term sheet, will he provide us access to that? Again, in the interest of ensuring Manitobans can know that their government has done a good job in shopping smart, is he willing to provide that? I'm certain he's able to access that, even though it may not be directly under his purview. He's obviously relayed information about that contract extension. He's clearly aware of it. He's hopefully seen that contract extension. Will he simply provide us with a copy of that contract extension so Manitobans can know whether or not, in fact, their government was shopping smart, as he says they were doing?
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Well, I don't know if we need to check the audio, or maybe I'm not quite getting through to the member from St. James, but as I said to him the last three answers, I'll say it again. This contract, and again, I provided some high-level information that even the member was aware of, to ensure that he gets what he's asking for. But I can tell you that government, again, this is a government-held contract, has nothing to do with Crown Services. So if the member has concerns with how government departments work, then I suggest maybe he could take it up with another party, potentially maybe, one day, heaven forbid, they do form government. Maybe it'll have an opportunity to change the way things are done. But in the interim, this is a contract that has nothing to do with Crown Services. And the member should appreciate that. And I think in the benefit of Manitobans listening online and watching online, I would believe that in the time that we have left, the member would like to move on to a question of importance to Manitobans.
The member for St. James.
Yeah, I thank the minister for the question. Unfortunately, again, just proving that he's not willing to ensure Manitobans have access to the information that they require, which he's clearly in a position to access. So I want to go back to the work that had been done in preparation to tender a contract in 2020. Manitoba Hydro Telecom expressed an interest in wanting to participate in that tendering process when it came online. Yet we've obtained documents that show Hydro, and in turn Manitoba Hydro Telecom, were told that they could not participate. Can he set the record straight on why Manitoba Hydro Telecom was told they should not participate when an RFP gets posted?
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, again. And certainly we'll talk about, again, this, and I believe the members talking about the opportunity to light up our dark fiber. And if that's not the case, certainly I'm sure the member will take the opportunity to correct me, but go back a little bit in time. Again, this falls under my colleague in Central Services put out an RFQ. RFQ identified a number of proponents that were willing to participate in an RFP. An RFP was let, and that process is currently still unfolding as we speak. And I hope that that is what the member was looking for. If not, I'm sure he'll correct me on that.
The member for St. James.
Yeah, the minister said that the member will confirm, and I will confirm that he is talking about a totally different subject from the one that I was asking him about and that we've been discussing for the last half an hour or so. I'll reiterate the question for the benefit of the minister here. Manitoba Hydro Telecom expressed an interest in wanting to participate in this tendering process when it came online, and we're talking about the Manitoba network here. Yet we've obtained documents that show Hydro and in turn Manitoba Hydro Telecom were told that they could not participate. Could you set the record straight on why Manitoba Hydro Telecom was told they should not participate when the RFP was posted?
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Minister.
Well, the good thing about having a working pen and a piece of paper is, I wrote down the member's question, and he said Manitoba Hydro Telecom, yet he was clarifying again, was it the issue of Manitoba Network Agreement, which we have discussed at length. So the member did say Manitoba Hydro Telecom. These are two different entities. So maybe can I have him clarify that, please?
Member for St. James.
Sure. Again, we're specifically talking about work done in preparation to tender a new contract in 2020 relating to the Manitoba network. Manitoba Hydro Telecom expressed an interest in wanting to participate in that tendering process when it came online. Yet we know that they were told they are not supposed to participate in that RFP. Can you set the record straight on why Manitoba Hydro Telecom was told they shouldn't participate when that RFP was posted?
Mr. Chair.
Honourable Minister.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, in reviewing the member's question, he's referring to essentially a procurement issue, which has nothing to do with Crown services. So again, I would be more than willing to direct him to my colleague, the Minister of Central Services, to potentially respond to any inquiries that he may have regarding Manitoba Network Agreement and Manitoba Hydro Telecom. So
The hour being
darn.
5 o'clock. Committee rise.